We thought Earth was just another blue marble ripe for the taking. But when the planetary scan hit our consoles, the warning sirens deafened the bridge. Class 9, Deathworld. A world of crushing gravity, corrosive air and apex predators. And we were about to learn humanity was looking right back. High Admiral Victor Cole stood at the vanguard of the bridge, his hands clasped firmly behind his back. Beyond the reinforced transparent aluminum of the dreadnought Invictus, the void of space stretched out cold and unyielding. But Victor wasn't looking at the void. His gaze was fixed on the holographic projection of the Sol system, a seemingly unremarkable collection of planets orbiting a standard yellow dwarf star. For 3 decades, the galactic ascendancy had swept through the Orion Arm. They were a civilization built on the principle of absolute order, absorbing weaker worlds and stripping them of their resources to feed the ever-expanding machinery of the Empire. They had subjugated the methane breathers of Sirius, crushed the crystalline sentience of Alpha Centauri, and brought the subterranean hives of Kepler into absolute compliance. In all that time, Victor had never known defeat. He had never even known a challenge. To him, the universe was a mathematical equation, and the ascendancy was the only correct answer. Status of the orbital approach. Victor asked, his voice a low, resonant rumble that demanded immediate obedience. At the primary sensor console, Chief Science Officer Simon Clark adjusted his uniform collar, his fingers dancing across the haptic interface. We are passing the orbit of the 4th planet now, Admiral. Negligible atmospheric pressure, high iron oxide content, completely sterile. Our target, the 3rd planet, is dead ahead. Visuals are coming online. The main screen flickered, replacing the tactical map with a high-definition optical feed. Earth. It hung in the darkness like a fragile jewel of cobalt blue and swirling alabaster-white continents of lush green and brown peeking through the cloud cover. It was beautiful. To the ascendancy, beauty usually meant weakness. Planets with abundant liquid water and stable climates were typically inhabited by soft, docile species creatures that had never needed to fight for survival and would surrender at the first sight of a plasma lance. "It looks peaceful," murmured Tactical Officer Gregory Mills, a veteran of 50 planetary bombardments, standing to Victor's right. No orbital defense rings, no heavily fortified moon bases. Their satellite network is primitive, largely unshielded communications relays and basic optical surveillance. Primitive, yes, but highly cluttered, Simon interjected, squinting at a stream of intercepted data scrolling down his secondary monitor. I am already picking up thousands of unencrypted radio wave broadcasts. They are broadcasting their existence to the entire sector. It is absolute sheer arrogance or profound ignorance. I am analyzing their global logistical networks now. I am seeing vast corporate and private names dominating their orbital space entities, operating under titles like SpaceX, Lockheed Martin, and Boeing. They seem to rely on chemical combustion and crude thrust mechanics to break their atmosphere. Victor sneered, a tight smile touching the corners of his mouth. Chemical combustion. They ride controlled explosions into the void. How quaint. They are barely a Tier 2 civilization. We will not even need to power the main siege batteries. A standard atmospheric blockade and a few localized EMP detonations over their primary population centers should bring their global leadership to their knees within 48 standard hours. The Ascendancy Fleet consisted of 400 warships, a sprawling armada of dreadnoughts cruisers and atmospheric insertion vessels. They moved in perfect synchronization, a swarm of dark metallic leviathans gliding silently past the orbit of Mars. They were untouchable, Their shields could withstand direct hits from thermonuclear warheads, and their ground troops wore exosuits that made them practically invincible against standard projectile weaponry. "Shall I initiate the standard subjugation protocols, Admiral?" Gregory asked, his fingers hovering over the weapons array interface. "I can have targeting locks on all their major political capitals in 3 minutes." "Not yet," Victor replied, raising a hand. Standard ascendancy doctrine required a thorough, deep scan of the target planet before any aggressive action. It was a formality really meant to identify the most lucrative resource deposits and ensure there were no hidden subterranean defenses. But Victor was a man of protocol. "Simon, run the deep penetration geological and biological scans. I want to know exactly what we are dealing with before we claim it. Find out what their atmosphere is made of, what their gravity well looks like, and what kind of soft tissue biology these humans possess. Initiating Deep Scan Protocol Alpha." Simon confirmed. A massive wave of invisible tachyon energy pulsed from the Invictus, washing over the blue planet below. For a moment, the bridge was quiet. The low hum of the dreadnought's dark matter engines was the only sound. Victor watched the blue marble turn slowly on the screen, already imagining the commendations he would receive from the High Council. Earth would be a crown jewel in his conquests. He pictured ascendancy, mining rigs tearing into the green continents, siphoning the oceans to cool their massive fusion reactors. But as the seconds ticked by, the silence on the bridge began to stretch. It stretched until it became taut, heavy, and deeply uncomfortable. Victor glanced over at his chief science officer. Simon had frozen. The man's hands were no longer dancing across the haptic interface. They were hovering, trembling slightly. The soft blue light of the console had reflected on Simon's face, but now it was rapidly flashing red, casting harsh crimson shadows across his pale skin. "Simon!" Victor prompted his tone, losing a fraction of its casual arrogance. "Report." Simon swallowed hard. He didn't look at the Admiral. His eyes were wide-locked on the cascading data streams that were completely overriding his screens. "Admiral, the computer must be malfunctioning. I am running a diagnostic." "We do not have time for diagnostics, Simon. What does the scan say?" Suddenly the primary artificial intelligence of the Invictus bypassed Simon's console entirely. The main bridge lights dimmed to a blood-red emergency hue, and a cold, synthesized voice echoed through the massive chamber. "Warning. Planetary scan complete. Habitat classification. Class 9. Deathworld. Lethal environment detected. Immediate abort of atmospheric insertion recommended." The bridge went deathly still. Gregory Mills stepped back from his tactical console as if it had shocked him. Even Victor Cole felt a cold spike of dread drive itself into his stomach. Class 9. In the Ascendancy's database, planets were graded from Class 1 paradise worlds with minimal tectonic activity and benign climates to Class 10, literally uninhabitable spheres of molten rock or absolute zero ice. The Ascendancy themselves evolved on a Class 3 world mild gravity-stable weather cooperative flora and fauna. A Class 9 world was a nightmare. It was a world that actively, violently tried to murder anything standing on its surface. Only mindless, hyper-armored beasts survived on Class 9 worlds. Sentient life evolving in such a crucible was considered statistically impossible. "Class 9, Victor whispered, stepping closer to the main display. "That's a glitch. It has to be. Simon explained this." Simon's fingers flew across the board, frantic now. "It is not a glitch, Admiral. The sensors are double verified. We are looking at a planetary death trap." "Show me," Victor commanded, his voice tight. "Break down the environmental hazards. How in the void is a species launching orbital rockets from a Class 9 hellscape. Simon pulled up the planetary schematics on the main holotable. Earth appeared, but the peaceful blue and green illusion was stripped away, replaced by violent, swirling threat metrics. "Let us start with the gravity," Simon said, his voice shaking. "Our species, and nearly every species in the Ascendancy, evolved on worlds with a standard gravitational pull of roughly 5 meters per second squared. Earth's gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. Admiral, it is nearly 3 times our standard. If our ground troops stepped out of their landers without their heavy-duty mechanized exosuits, their own skeletons would fracture under the weight of their flesh. Their cardiovascular systems would fail within minutes." Gregory scoffed nervously. "We have the exosuits. They can handle high-G environments. The exosuits will drain their power cells in half the time, just keeping our soldiers upright," Simon countered. "But the gravity is just the beginning. Look at their atmosphere." A chemical breakdown of Earth's air appeared. Nitrogen 78%. Simon read off. Oxygen 21%. "Admiral, oxygen is a highly volatile, highly reactive gas. It causes rapid oxidation in most metals. It fuels combustion. These creatures are literally breathing rocket fuel. Our standard infantry armor is rated for inert atmospheric combat. Prolonged exposure to this atmosphere will corrode our joints and seals. And if a plasma bolt so much as grazes an oxygen-rich pocket, it will ignite the air itself." Victor finished, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "They breathe a corrosive agent. What about the biology? The microbes?" Simon's screen flickered, displaying horrifying microscopic imagery intercepted from human medical databases. Every cubic centimeter of their air, their water, and their soil is teeming with predatory microorganisms. Bacteria, viruses, fungal spores. The human immune system is a state of constant, unrelenting biological warfare. They have white blood cells that literally hunt, consume, and dissolve invading pathogens using acid. Admiral, a single drop of Earth water would introduce enough alien pathogens into our biology to wipe out the entire fleet in a week. Our biofilters are completely inadequate for this level of microbiological aggression. And the planet itself, Gregory asked, looking at the tectonic readouts. The crust is fractured into massive plates that float on a sea of molten magma, Simon explained, pulling up a map of fault lines. These plates constantly collide, causing massive seismic disruptions. They have entire mountain ranges built from the violent ejection of liquid fire from the planet's core. And their weather, because of the massive temperature differentials and the planet's rotation, they experience colossal atmospheric vortices. They call them hurricanes and tornadoes. Storms the size of continents that can generate wind speeds capable of tearing our atmospheric fighters to shreds. Victor stared at the holographic Earth. It wasn't a peaceful blue jewel. It was a swirling, toxic, crushing, boiling cauldron of violence. And yet, the lights on the dark side of the planet proved that a highly advanced civilization had not only survived here, but had dominated the chaos. "How?" Victor muttered almost to himself. "How does a soft-tissued bipedal species survive this? How do they not go extinct every single day?" "Because they adapted to it, sir," Simon said grimly. "Admiral, I have been intercepting their local communications, analyzing their entertainment and their history. You need to see this." Simon threw a series of video feeds onto the main screen. They weren't military broadcasts, they were civilian intercepts. The first video showed a human plunging from an aircraft thousands of feet in the air, plummeting toward the lethal ground, only to deploy a thin sheet of fabric at the last possible second to slow their descent. They were laughing. "They do this for recreation. They call it skydiving," Simon whispered. The next video showed a human purposefully ingesting a chemical compound that triggered pain receptors. "Capsaicin," Simon read. "It is a botanical neurotoxin designed to deter predators. Humans consume it in massive quantities for pleasure. They call it hot sauce." Then the feed switched to military data, real-time footage of human conflicts. Victor watched in absolute horror as human soldiers wearing nothing but thin, woven fabrics and rudimentary ceramic plates marched through thick jungles filled with toxic flora and trudged across blistering deserts that would bake an ascendancy warrior alive. "I have intercepted data from their private defense sector." Simon continued, his voice dropping to a terrified hush. "Corporations like Boston Dynamics are building autonomous quadrupedal hunting machines. A company called Palantir is running predictive algorithmic warfare tracking that rivals our own shipboard AI. They have a weapon system they call the A-10 Warthog, built around a rotary cannon that fires depleted uranium rounds. They hurl radioactive, hyperdense metal at each other, just to pierce armor. So their entire history is an unbroken chain of devastating, industrialized warfare. They have fought 2 global conflicts that engulfed the entire planet, and they did it before they even split the atom." Gregory Mills stepped away from his console, his face pale. "They are apex predators. They didn't just survive the Deathworld, they conquered it. If we land down there, we aren't the conquerors, Admiral. We are the prey." Victor Cole felt his pristine, mathematical worldview cracking. He had come here expecting to step on ants. Instead, he had kicked a nest of vipers bred in the fires of a Class 9 hell. "Cancel the targeting locks," Victor ordered, his voice suddenly very quiet. "Hold the fleet at the edge of the gravity well. Activate absolute stealth protocols. We need to withdraw and rethink our entire A-sharp piercing alarm suddenly cut through the bridge. It wasn't the internal warning system. It was the communications array." "Admiral," Simon shouted, staring at his console in sheer disbelief. "Our stealth protocols are failing." "Wait, no, they aren't failing. The humans, they are painting us." "Painting us?" Victor demanded. "With what? Targeting lasers?" Simon replied, his voice cracking. "Radio waves, microwave bursts. Admiral, they just synced with our primary communications frequency. They've bypassed our encryption in less than 4 minutes. We are receiving a direct transmission from the surface." Victor's blood ran cold. The ascendancy encryption was supposed to be mathematically unbreakable by any Tier 2 civilization. But the humans had just kicked the door down. "Put it on screen," Victor commanded, bracing himself. The holographic map of Earth vanished, replaced by the image of a human. He was an older male, wearing a crisp dark uniform, adorned with ribbons and medals. He sat behind a large wooden desk, staring directly into the camera. His eyes were cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of fear. Beside him stood a flag bearing 50 white stars on a blue canton, alongside red and white stripes. "Unknown vessels." The human spoke, his voice translated instantly by the ship's AI. "This is General Robert Mitchell of the United States Space Command. We've been tracking your arrival since you passed the orbit of Jupiter. You are currently holding position in our orbital space with weapons systems powered. You have exactly 3 minutes to identify yourselves, state your intentions, and power down your forward batteries. If you fail to comply, we will assume hostile intent, and we will swat you out of our sky." General Mitchell leaned forward, a grim, terrifying smile appearing on his face. "Welcome to Earth. We hope you brought heavier armor." The bridge of the Invictus hung in a stunned, suffocating silence. High Admiral Victor Cole stared at the holographic projection of General Robert Mitchell, a mere human from a Class 9 Deathworld who was currently demanding the surrender of an Ascendancy dreadnought fleet. Victor's pride, honed over decades of unopposed conquest, flared hot in his chest. Fear was quickly being replaced by a cold, calculating fury. He was the commander of 400 warships. The Ascendancy did not negotiate with unaligned primitives, regardless of how hostile their home planet's ecosystem was. "General Mitchell," Victor replied, stepping into the pickup zone of the communication array, his voice radiating engineered authority. "I am High Admiral Victor Cole of the Galactic Ascendancy. Your threats are as empty as your orbital space. You are a divided, gravity-bound species, relying on controlled combustion. We possess shielding technology that your chemical explosives cannot scratch. Power down your targeting arrays, or we will demonstrate the true meaning of orbital supremacy." Victor muted the channel, turning sharply to his tactical officer. "Gregory, reroute primary reactor power to the forward plasma lances. Target their moon. I want a visible high-yield detonation on the lunar surface. Show these arrogant creatures the scale of the firepower they are trifling with. Powering forward lances. Admiral Dorr." Gregory said, his fingers flying across the console, targeting the largest lunar crater, firing in 3, 2, 1. A blinding beam of superheated ionized plasma erupted from the prow of the Invictus. It crossed the vast expanse of space in a fraction of a second, striking the pale surface of Earth's moon. The resulting explosion was magnificent, a silent, blossoming lotus of blue fire that gouged a crater 10 miles wide, turning the lunar rock into glowing liquid glass. It was a strike that would have forced the surrender of any Tier 2 civilization in the Orion Arm. Victor unmuted the channel, a smug smile touching his lips. "Consider that a warning shot, General. The next strike will be aimed at your primary population centers." On the screen, General Mitchell didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He simply picked up a standard primitive communication device on his desk, spoke 3 words, and set it down. "Execute Operation Aegis." Admiral Chief Science Officer Simon Clark's voice shattered the momentary triumph on the bridge. He was practically screaming over his console. "Multiple energy spikes detected, but they aren't coming from the surface." "Explain," Victor barked. "They are in orbit, stealthed platforms." They were completely cold, masking their thermal signatures behind the planet's magnetic field. Simon's hands trembled as the tactical map populated with dozens of red icons surrounding the Ascendancy fleet. "Sir, I am reading identification tags. Northrop Grumman orbital defense satellites. And something else. Classified platforms tagged under DARPA. They aren't powering up energy weapons. They are..." Simon stopped, his eyes widening in pure disbelief. "What are they doing, Simon?" "They are opening physical launch tubes, Admiral. They are throwing rocks at us." Gregory Mills laughed, a harsh, nervous sound. "Rocks against dark matter shields. They are more primitive than we thought." "No, you don't understand," Simon shouted, overriding the main display to show the incoming projectiles. "Solid tungsten cylinders, 20 feet long, 2 feet wide, no explosives. They are utilizing a gravitational drop combined with electromagnetic rail acceleration. Admiral, they are moving at a fraction of the speed of light." Before Victor could issue the order to evade the first kinetic projectile hit, it didn't strike the Invictus. It struck the Ascendancy cruiser Vanguard positioned on their left flank. There was no fiery explosion, no dramatic exchange of energy shields. The sheer, unfathomable kinetic energy of the hyper-dense tungsten rod bypassed the thermal-based shielding entirely. The screen flared a blinding white. When the visual sensors compensated the Vanguard, a ship capable of subjugating entire solar systems was simply gone. It had been shattered into 1,000,000 pieces of jagged shrapnel, instantly atomized by the kinetic impact of a glorified spare. The bridge of the Invictus violently shook as the shock wave of the debris field battered their hull. Alarms shrieked from every bulkhead. Crimson warning lights bathed the crew in a hellish glow. Shields are completely ineffective against kinetic bombardment of this magnitude. Gregory yelled over the din, frantically trying to maneuver the massive dreadnought. "Admiral, they have 60 more of those platforms locked onto our capital ships. If they fire a full volley, the fleet will be decimated." Victor gripped the railing of the command deck, his knuckles turning white. His mind struggled to comprehend the brutal barbaric genius of the weapon. The humans hadn't bothered to develop complex plasma matrices or localized dark matter imploders. They had simply calculated the maximum amount of brute force physical trauma they could inflict using gravity and metal and weaponized it. It was the purest, most terrifying expression of a species born on a Class 9 Deathworld. They didn't fight to subjugate. They fought to annihilate. "General Torstest." Victor said, his voice, stripped of all its former arrogance, raw and echoing across the open channel. "Ceasefire. I repeat, ceasefire." General Mitchell's image reappeared on the main screen. The human leaned back in his chair, folding his hands, resting on his desk. The absolute lack of adrenaline in the man's posture was unnerving. He looked like a man who had just swatted a nuisance insect, not a commander who had just obliterated an alien warship. "We gave you 3 minutes. Admiral—" Mitchell said, his voice, calm, steady, and terrifyingly cold. "You chose to irradiate a portion of our moon. We take property damage very seriously down here. Your weapon? It bypassed our kinetic barriers entirely." Victor murmured, the shock overriding his military discipline. "It's just physics, Admiral," Mitchell replied. "A telephone pole made of solid tungsten dropped from orbit hits with the force of a tactical nuclear warhead, but without the messy fallout. We call them rods from God, abusawas. We developed them decades ago because we were paranoid about each other. Imagine what we've been building since we realized we weren't alone in the dark." Victor looked at the tactical map. The red icons of the DARPA and Northrop Grumman platforms were glowing menacingly, their launch tubes still open, completely unopposed by the Ascendancy's advanced, yet utterly mismatched countermeasures. The fleet was trapped. If the humans fired, it would be a slaughter. "What are your terms?" Victor asked, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. It was the first time in his life he had ever spoken them. Mitchell leaned forward, his eyes locking onto the camera lens, seemingly piercing straight through the void and into Victor's soul. "We don't have terms, Admiral. We have a warning. You came here scanning for weakness. You looked at our blue skies and our oceans, and you thought we were soft. But you forgot that to survive a world that constantly tries to kill you, you have to become the deadliest thing on it." Mitchell pointed a finger at the screen. "Take your fleet. Turn around. Go back to whatever pristine, peaceful sector of space you came from. Tell your High Council. Tell your emperors. Tell whoever runs your ascendancy that Sol 3 is off limits. If we catch your ships in our sector again, we won't just destroy your fleet. We will reverse engineer your dark matter drives. We will mount our weapons to them, and we will bring the war to your doorstep. And let me assure you, Admiral, humanity is very, very good at war." The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge of the Invictus in a heavy, suffocating silence. The red emergency lights continued to pulse, casting long shadows across the faces of the terrified crew. "Admiral," Gregory asked softly, his hands hovering over the navigation console. "Orders." Victor Cole looked one last time at the blue and white marble suspended in the dark. It was no longer a jewel in his eyes. It was a bomb ticking quietly in the dark, waiting for a reason to detonate. "Disengage all weapon systems," Victor ordered, his voice hollow. "Spool up the hyperdrives. All ships are to execute a maximum burn retreat to the Orion perimeter. Erase all navigational data leading to this sector from the fleet's mainframe." "Sir?" Simon asked, confused. "Erase the data." "Yes, Simon," Victor said, turning away from the viewing screen, unable to look at the Deathworld any longer. If the High Council learns of this world, their pride will force them to send an armada. And if they do that, these humans will do exactly what they promised. They will learn our technology, and they will exterminate us. As the mighty dreadnoughts of the Galactic Ascendancy turned their massive thrusters away from Earth, fleeing into the safety of the deep black, Victor Cole realized a fundamental truth of the universe. There were predators, and there was prey. And humanity was the monster that hid in the dark, waiting for the predators to make a mistake. Did you feel the chill of facing humanity's true destructive potential? Earth isn't just a home, it's a crucible, and the galaxy just found out we are its apex predators. If this HFY sci-fi journey kept you on the edge of your seat, don't let the story end here. Hit that like button, share this tale with your fellow sci-fi lovers, and subscribe to the channel for more epic stories of humanity conquering the stars. Stay vigilant, Earthlings.